Santa's got his reindeer leading the way. He shows up every year around Christmas Day. Mrs. Claus, she chills at home. Says, Kris Kringle, you go, go, go. I said, hey, babe, Santa's off on a sleigh ride. I said, hey, Sugar Plum, Santa's off on a sleigh ride. And all the reindeers say,
Welcome to this special Christmas edition of Every Friday with Dan and Olivia. I'm Dan Miles.
And I'm Olivia Darbo.
Since Christmas falls directly on a Friday this year, I felt compelled to acknowledge that fact. But my topic for today is actually not Christmas related. First of all, welcome back. I got my Christmas present. My co-host is back.
I'm so happy to be back, and my deepest apologies for not being here last week.
I forgive you, Tom forgives you, Nick Offerman forgives you, and the listening audience all forgive you. Back in episode 3, which we ended up calling Don't Forget to Take the Girl, we talked about one of Olivia's earliest roles, Princess Jenna in Conan the Destroyer. Today I'm going to be asking her about another one of her movie roles, but before I do that, I want to tell a quick story about another actress friend of mine. Oh, sorry, not actress, actor. This is someone who I knew when I lived in Sacramento. Her name was Patty Hasty. I used to see her just about every day down at the California Secretary of State office, where we both had to do runs there for our job. She usually had her young son with her, who was presumably not yet school age. When I told her I was moving to Arizona, she invited me over to her house before I left, and I met her husband, Dale. That was in 1991, and I've really had no contact with them since then. But one day, I was remembering her and what a nice person she was, so on a whim, I searched her name on Facebook, and I found an entry with her name and her picture, but I identified her as an actor/director, which was a surprise because I remember her mentioning once that she'd done some modeling in the past, but nothing about being an actor. So I read a little more. Into my great surprise, I found out she was in a movie with George Clooney.
Wow. And
not only was she in it, she actually played his wife. So I thought, man, that's pretty big time. So yeah. I got to see this movie. So got my hands on the DVD, probably from Netflix. I turn it on, and in the DVD menu, there's a framed picture of her. Then the very first shot of the movie, it's her water skiing. It's just a close-up of her face. She's not saying anything because you don't really talk when you're water skiing. She was smiling, laughing, having a good time. I thought, wow, she's like the star of this film. Go, Patty. So after that scene, George Clooney starts to do a monologue to set up the story. And as he's talking about his wife, the camera pans over to reveal her in a hospital bed in a coma. Apparently off-screen, she was in a water skiing accident. So for the entire rest of the movie, she just lies there, motionless. She never says a word. She never moves a muscle. She never comes out of the coma. I was waiting, a flashback or something? Nothing.
Yeah.
At the end of the film, I realized that the only requirement for this quote-unquote role was to lie motionless with your eyes closed. The part could have literally been played by a mannequin.
And tell people that you just played George Clooney's wife in a film.
Well, all of her interactions with George Clooney are entirely one way.
Right.
He speaks, she lies there and does nothing.
But can you imagine her being at a party and people are like, hey, Patty, so what have you been up to? Well, I just got cast as George Clooney's wife in a movie. Oh, no way. I mean, people would just be raving that you couldn't even say, let me stop you there. I'm in a coma and I don't talk the whole way through.
I'm telling you,
There's
I was impressed until it was so extreme because, as I said, there was all this preparation for her to be... the name of the movie is The Descendants. It was filmed in Hawaii. Apparently, sometime after I left Northern California, she and Dale and their kids also relocated out of state. They went to Hawaii. So I imagine a casting call out there is probably not quite as competitive as in LA. I mean, I'm sure there's performers, but not as many. It was just so funny because what's Patty up to these days? Oh, she's into acting. Oh, she's in a movie with George Clooney. Oh, she's in a coma. I have some pictures that I'll post on our Facebook group of her in action, so-called.
In the coma.
And, I'll show them to you, actually.
Okay, I'd love to see them.
I can do that quickly. I'll whip this around. So
I guess she didn't need makeup and hair.
Here's Patty. Here's Pat. And I know that people listening who aren't in our Facebook group are going to be like, what? Okay, so this is Patty, not in a coma. This is from the DVD menu.
Very pretty woman.
Okay, then... Not quite as pretty.
I'm so sorry.
pretty messed up.
I must say, she's very committed to being in a coma.
Gets better.
Yeah. Her mouth is open.
Here comes that Oscar winning moment.
That's a good choice, because your mouth would be open in a coma.
A good choice. The liveliest scene she has in the movie. The liveliest scene she has, her daughter, somebody's putting makeup on her face to try and help her look better.
No,
she sits. She still doesn't move, but
she looks like she does. She actually looks dead.
Right. Now, she's an important character in the film because a lot of the
he's got to have something to react to.
Well, no, a lot of the plot centers around her, and people talk about her all the time. I'm just saying is, in terms of, I'm an actor.
Yeah.
A little bit embarrassing. So, anyways, I just was reminded of that
Everybody's
story.
well, it's not a bad gig.
So anyways, I wanted to toss that out there. And for the people listening to the podcast who aren't in our Facebook group, I'm sorry you can't see those photos, but you can go see The Descendants, and she's in the movie. Now, in terms of your own non-comatose acting roles, when you were on my other show, I asked you if there were any standout performances you were particularly proud of, and you mentioned a film called The Last Good Time, which you did in the mid-'90s. This was directed by Bob Balaban. People remember him probably from Midnight Cowboy or Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He's in that Christopher Guest troupe of actors.
Yes.
I've got the co-stars and the plot, and I can run down all that. But let me just ask you, of all the films you've done, why that is a standout for you?
Well, to a large degree because of Bob Balaban, because we'd worked on a film called Greedy, and he had been, we'd acted alongside of each other in that. But he's a great guy, and he wrote this film, and it's something that he'd been wanting to get on the ground, that he'd originally cast Laura Dern in and somebody else, but when he came to me and the people that he'd originally wanted to cast hadn't panned out for whatever reason, he said, I've got this amazing actor called Armin Mueller-Stahl, who I'd just seen in The Music Box with Jessica Lange, who I was a huge fan of his work. And just the opportunity to work with him as a director. And, I just thought he was extremely talented. And I loved the script, and I loved Armin Mueller-Stahl. I loved Maureen Stapleton, who was at that stage attached to it, and Lionel Stander, who's not with us anymore. But, there was just such an amazing group of people. I thought it would be really cool to shoot in Brooklyn in the wintertime in the snow, and the role was great. It reminded me kind of a little bit of a more dramatic version. Well, Harold and Maude is one of my favorite films, but it had that kind of flavor to it, except the roles were sort of reversed. That you can kind of be any age and sort of somehow find love, fall in love. Mm-hmm. They had an interesting relationship. I mean, the two characters didn't actually end up together, but they certainly rode the wave of a relationship in a kind of authentic way, which sometimes happens.
Yeah. It's an interesting story. I'll run down the story real quick. The actor you mentioned,
Have
Armin...
you seen the film, Dan?
I have.
Okay.
And I should mention, I was going to mention at the end, I'll mention now, it's hard to get.
It is, because it was one of Samuel Goldwyn's last films that came out right before the Perez family. So then Samuel Goldwyn folded, and you're absolutely right. It's very difficult to find. Yeah,
I actually bought it on eBay from somebody who recorded it off of Encore, just burned it onto a DVD.
You're amazing. Like, you have these resources that I don't know anybody else on this planet that has.
I wanted to see it. Hey, the first role you mentioned was a stage one, Entertaining Mr. Sloan. So I thought, I'm glad you enjoyed that one, but we all can't see it. So you said, well, in terms of a film, and you mentioned this one. Now, I thought that this movie had kind of a European sensibility, not just because the lead actor was German, but like I said, it set in New York. No one else was European. But I think what it is Bob Balaban, he would fade scenes out abruptly.
Yeah.
It reminded me of Krzysztof Kieslowski, the Polish director,
mm-hmm.
who did The Three Colors and the Decalogue.
Mm-hmm.
And also the pacing, how a lot of time was spent with characters just sort of thinking about things and doing things, and it wasn't in a hurry. It wasn't cut fast and everything. So basically, I can tell the story pretty quickly, particularly since a lot of people, unfortunately, probably can't get their hands on it to see it. Maybe we should auction it off. Maybe we should put a new feature on the podcast. They should sell this. Okay, here's an idea. Let's see if this works. Okay, this is going to come up on a Friday. Between this show and our next show, send me your name and address privately, and I'll send you the DVD. and the name of the next person on the list, and we'll take mine and pass it all around to our listeners. Whoever wants to get added to the list in the next 7 days, watch it, pass it along, and I don't know.
Yeah.
So anyways, this...
If we want to do that, by the way, I have a poster of it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. It's a really cool poster. We actually did a photo session for it. Armin flew all the way from Germany for this photo session. And it was a good one.
So
it is that one. But then actually, no, that's one that's sort of superimposed with him in the background. But that's a cool poster. That's one of them.
Okay.
No. Actually, I'm mistaken. That is from the photo session, and what they did is the backdrop, which is Armin looking at me. For those of you who can't see it, I'll just describe it. It's Armin with a violin, because he's a violinist in the film, a retired violinist, and the shot of me in the foreground in the leather jacket is from the photo shoot. So both of them were pictures taken at that shoot, but actually not of us together.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. All right. Well, as you said, a violinist widower on a fixed income who discovers that he owes a bunch of back taxes because his friend from upstairs did his taxes and didn't know his pension was taxable. So he has all this money he owes. That friend is played by Lionel Stander, as you mentioned. You know, it's funny, Lionel Stander was in 1936 Frank Capra film Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, playing Cornelius Cobb, a.k.a.
right.
Corny Cobb. Totally made up for a movie name. But
nice little bit of trivia there. I only ever knew him from Heart to Heart.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. A lot of people know him from that, Heart to Heart, and I didn't ever see that show.
And Mrs. Hart.
A gravelly voice too. I knew him from the 1930s. Maureen Stapleton plays the lonely neighbor.
Classic actress.
Your own character, you play this kind of tough character. She's like maybe not well educated, but she's street smart. You know, mixed up with the wrong crowd.
Yeah.
Atrocious table manners.
Yes.
How many piercings in your ear?
Several.
There's a shot where your
not just my ear.
Yeah, okay.
But we won't get into that.
Okay, all right. But your hair was pulled back, and your ear had like 7 or 8 or 9. It was like covered with piercings.
Yeah.
So at any rate,
it was the mid-90s. Grunge rock. Just think about that.
I'll have to say, though, I do have to say this, you know, as someone who knows you and cares about you,
Thank you, Dan.
It's difficult to see you being abused.
Well, yeah, I mean, she was kicked around quite a bit, and you know, homeless. She's a kind of character, you know, the kind of, you know, she's a street urchin, really, and her boyfriend's sort of, you know, been emotionally and physically abusive to her, and there are people in the world that kind of fall into those kind of circumstances if they leave home. I think I always saw her as somebody who was a runaway, so she sleeps like in hallways and. Right. Just, you know, I mean, she's one step away from being homeless, only from the standpoint that she knows how to get in a door. In fact, there's one scene where you actually see a neighbor go in to the apartment complex, and her objective is to get in the door. And so she runs quickly behind the person to slip in the door so she can actually stay warm that night when she sleeps.
Street smart. She knows the angles and stuff. But it's interesting because at one point he hides his money in a book, figuring this girl isn't going to ever look in a book. Yeah. And then he walks in the room and you're looking in a book. So it was a little bit of a surprise. And then there's another scene where he's hiding it somewhere else. And I said, Balaban just kind of that's all you need to see. So he just fades it out.
Yeah.
Now most of the abuse, the verbal abuse is what's on screen. The physical abuse is off screen, but we still have to see like the aftermath. Like, my boyfriend beat me up. Don't call the cops. So I'm just saying it's kind of difficult to watch. You know, and at the opposite extreme, you have a sex scene, which I think is what the title is a reference to, The Last Good Time. Mm-hmm. Not for you at 21, but for him at whatever age he is. Now, when on screen, when we see two people in an intimate moment like that, I mean, how many people are actually on the set watching this go on?
It was one of the most ironic things about love scenes is suddenly, when that time approaches, there's triple the people that were ever on set before. So you're kind of sitting there, you know, getting ready to do your scene, and that's when you have to sort of, you know, pipe up and say, can we clear the set a little bit? I didn't know we had 300 crew. I thought it was just 100.
Oh, this is the topless scene, and my cousin's here, and the director's
hey, my cousin and my aunt and his kids are here. And by the way, it's always the time where the person you're doing the love scene with, their wife happens to show up that day. And that's always really awkward and uncomfortable because, you know, it's like, oh, you know what? There's so many other days you could have showed up other than this particular one. But
I do want to mention to everybody at oliviadabo.net, You can see about 3 minutes from this film. I think it's the last scene that you do in the movie.
Yeah.
And it at least can show the apartment you guys were in and a little bit of the interaction, but it's not really, I can't recommend it as representative of the film, but it's, better than nothing kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I have to say, as I just mentioned about, seeing you abused, clearly my least favorite role of yours to date, not because you're not good in it, quite the contrary, is that Alias thing where Ethan Hawke straps all the explosives to you and blows you up.
Oh, right.
Not
yes.
cool. You were convincing. You were too convincing. Obviously, couldn't he blow up Jennifer Aniston, I was thinking? But what I want to know is, clearly he's telling you in a little headset, don't worry, I'm not going to do it. And obviously your character knows you're going to die. He's going to do it. And you're like, just like so defeated. And what I want to know is, how do you get yourself in that mindset, and how long during the shoot do you have to stay in that?
Really good question. Incidentally, that particular part and scene, I had to stay in it all day. Yeah. We were shooting in Paramount Studios, and they were sort of trying to make it look like Berlin, which they succeeded in doing because that show had sort of locations all over the world because of the CIA agents and what have you. But and who directed it was Ken Wall from 30-something.
Yeah, I know he is.
I believe that's his name, isn't it?
Yeah, W-A-H-L, Ken Wall.
An amazing director, an incredible actor. But he just kept encouraging me, stay in it, because, a great director will always start, especially with an emotional scene, if an actor needs time to warm up, they will start with the large POV first, and then just keep coming in closer and closer. So by the time you come to your close-up, you're like really full with the emotional, But with me, it was like right there. And so I basically had to just stay with the emotion the entire time. And he basically just said, yeah, don't even really leave the square, which is where we were shooting in this kind of town square in Berlin.
Well, that scene is on your website, and if I can see myself seeing the other movie, the Bad Balaban movie from time to time, once was enough for that scene. I never want to see you in that position again. Yeah. But I recommend people go take a look at it. Your acting is great. It's too great. You really look like you're about to die, get blown up, and then the bastard does it. He blows you up.
Well, I'm literally, I have dynamite strapped to me. But you just, as an actor, you just have to kind of put yourself in that position. Like, if I know I'm going to die and I have dynamite attached to me, it was a very interesting thing to experience because it was such a visceral experience of kind of really thinking that I was going to die. Incidentally, I had done the audition, and the song that they'd used for that was You Can't Always Get What You Want. And they had to change it for Pop Goes the Weasel by the time we actually shot it, because obviously getting the publishing rights was too difficult for the Stones song. But in the audition, I started to sing it, and halfway through, he goes, that's enough. He says, just stop. He's like, you got the part. He's like, I can't watch you do the whole rest of the song. So that was relieving. I
don't know. I just want to punch Ethan Hawke in the face for that. I realize he's acting too, and it's just a character, but oh man, not cool. Do you have anything else you want to say about either of those movies? Anything else in your head?
The Last Good Time, gosh, for me, I think, there are other things that I have loved since then that I've done that are more current, but I think that sticks out in my mind just because of the people involved and my adoration for Bob Balaban. So if anybody can kind of track it down, I think it's a film worth watching, because it's got some interesting messages, and it's sort of it has moments of humor and melancholia, and it's kind of got all the good stuff.
It's a good movie. I enjoyed it, and like I said, yourself, a great talent. He's a great talent. Maureen Stapleton, Lionel Stander's last film. I don't understand why it's not more readily available, even for that reason alone, but what the heck. Well, thanks for all that information. I will say I enjoy that movie more than Conan the Barbarian, and we'll try and keep in that direction.
Well,
Well,
yes.
there you go. It's just-
I was a mere child in that, and I mean that's a
Yeah.
Fantasia film, and Lost Good Time is it's like a really cool little indie. That and Kicking and Screaming, which is also one of my favorite. There were several films that I did in the '90s, Live Nude Girls as well. That all they were like when independent movies were really coming up, and directors were really
Yeah.
getting an opportunity to kind of show their stuff as were the actors in it. So
Yeah, also Wayne's World 90s, Greedy 90s. It was a good decade for you.
yes, yes, for sure.
Okay, well, for those who listened to last week's show...
I feel like a guest on this show today. It's so strange. Maybe it's because it's I feel like Tom's over here in front of me, and I feel like I'm on your guys' show.
Well,
like I'm trying to...
Well, let me explain. I think the people listening every once in a while want to hear about one of your acting roles. So
Okay, that must be why.
Each batch, I'm going to dredge one up, and it's going to have that vibe.
Right, okay.
But hey, as we all know who listens to the show, next week, it's a black hole for Dan. Don't know the music, don't know the topic. I'm just going to...
snap.
I'll be the guest on your show. Okay, so now, at this point, I want to mention, last week I had said that I would talk a little bit about listener feedback, and some people thought the show was a little bit too short. Our last two, though, last week's was 40 minutes, and the one where Tom joined us on episode 8 was 36 minutes. But prior to that, we're like 20 minutes, 22 minutes, 24 minutes. That is a little bit short.
20, 24, 25. What's the difference?
So what we're going to do is a couple things.
Where's the clock? There's no clock today. That's all. This feels so empty here in this couch.
I hit it for you.
Okay, all right, you hit it.
I do have it.
Yeah, keep it that way.
Trying to learn from my previous mistakes. Let's check that. So basically what we're going to do is we don't want Tom to have to wait till the end of the day to speak. We want to know what he thinks about Bob Balaban. We want to know what he thinks about what he's just witnessed. And why not ask him while it's fresh in his head? And we have a special way to introduce Tom, which is...
And now it's time for Tom at 20.
Tom at 20!
Before we listen to Tom, we have to give credit to the creator of that jingle, which was Robert Lang, a friend of mine in Phoenix. I had the idea for calling this Tom at 20 48 hours ago. And after I had the idea, I said, Robert, could you make a jingle so it isn't my voice or Tom's voice or Olivia's voice? Less than 24 hours later, he sends me several. So that was done by Robert, who is a friend of mine and a fan of yours. And now a fan of Tom's. He sung his name out loud.
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely little contribution.
Yes, thank you,
We
Robert.
appreciated it.
So, Tom at 20, we're actually 23 minutes and 41 seconds by my count. And, as I smack my iPod on the table.
Oh.
Listen, welcome early to an episode of the show. This is already jacked up and awkward, but in the future, people will just hear the cue. They'll know it's time for you, and we won't have to frickin' explain it and reinvent the wheel every time. So,
He's ready to speak now, Dan. Let him have the floor.
zip my mouth.
Thanks. That's my boss, everyone. Dan Miles, a self-made podcaster. He's quite a guy. That's Olivia. She's gorgeous, and she's one lady who really knows how to take care of herself. And my name is Tom, by the way. I take care of both of them, and it ain't easy. Because when they met, it was every Friday.
Film noir.
Brilliant.
No, that was
That was Lionel Stander.
Yes, it was. That
Very
was, that was
good.
my Max from Heart to
That
Heart.
was awesome.
Heart to Heart. Stephanie Powers, maybe my first. No,
crush.
Not my first celebrity crush, but maybe my first pubescent celebrity crush.
Yes. I hear you. She's a
Yeah,
hot little number.
yeah, and
Feisty redhead.
But I also know Lionel Stander from the Transformers movie in the mid '80s, and I'm sure he and his family would be just thrilled to know that's his legacy in my world, where he played a character called Cop. Old timer, that's something you'll never be if you don't get back to the city. Now, Dan knows very much my strange, loving, loyal relationship with that
Transformers.
with that piece of children's entertainment. Yes.
Well, I am being Tom Bowers on the spoon right now, and I am going on Wikipedia and entering Lionel Stander while
the
he's
wiki.
speaking to Olivia.
Yeah.
Well, because
yeah.
I like
He
you
looks
guys-
like a mobster. That's what I love. He's kind of got almost like a hammerhead shaped. I'm not meaning this as an insult, but
not an
you know
attractive
how
man.
those no he
Ernest Borgnine
but that's
type.
what makes him
very
attractive.
much,
He's
yeah.
just got a lot of. He's a character actor. who I think it's sort of what gave him the roles that he had and why he played them so well is a whole package there to take in.
Speaking of his roles, I have all of them in front of me. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town was 1936. Mm-hmm. He was in a film called The Gay Deception in 1935. Draw your own conclusions. Be in the 30s, I'm sure. Okay, let me see. I'm trying to see what The Sin of Harold Diddlebach. Call Northside 777, the Jimmy Stewart movie.
Oh, brilliant.
Let's see here. I'm going to... Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968. Can picture him in that. The Eroticist. At any rate, he was in a ton of movies. New York, 1977. 1941, the Steven Spielberg movie he was in. And here it is, last on the list, The Last Good Time. Interesting that his last movie had the word last in it.
But another reason why the movie's so nostalgic to myself and various other people, the other 9 people who've seen it, is that, it was the last film that he did. And he died around the time that it came out. And
he was great in it. He's an Alzheimer's patient. He wants his daughter to visit him.
Yes.
And they all say, she visited you yesterday.
Yeah.
You just forgot.
In fact, I think...
She did.
Yeah. The scenes between he and Armin, I think, are some of it's the comic relief of the film.
Oh, yeah. He mentioned some...
Besides me flicking the peas at him across the dinner table.
That's what I mentioned, the table manners. He mentioned... It's really probably the funniest moment in the whole movie is he mentions a comment that, kind of embarrasses Armin, and then he goes, what? He goes, no one's listening. They couldn't hear me anyways. He goes, hey, I'm dying. Help me. Nobody does anything. So, yeah.
That's right.
Hilarious. Okay, well, that was our first Tom at 20. It was an impersonation of Lionel Standard.
Tom, do you have anything else to say?
Just that, how you guys doing?
Good. We're
feeling good. Got the rust knocked off. Y'all feeling loose?
Yeah.
You feeling ready to go?
Loving your Star Wars T-shirt. I love that the stormtroopers are playing an air guitar or a rock guitar.
Tis the season.
To be jolly,
the Imperial Power
and Darth
Trio
is
here.
on the drums. I see that.
Darth Vader's on the drums with lightsaber drumsticks, which seems to me like that might defeat the purpose. It might just go right through the drum head and the floor.
Oh yeah,
but,
definitely.
Hey.
I'm so glad you mentioned Star Wars because last week we were talking in anticipation of Star Wars because last week's episode aired on the premiere date and we wanted to talk to you about your voice role in Star Wars and you weren't here. So how did you get that role?
Oh, Luminara. I was lucky enough to get offered that role, but it was only one show, and I went in and it was me and Padawan and they sort of said, the creator of the show said, we want to really just kind of explore this relationship as you being her being your apprentice and you being a Jedi, sort of teaching her with your wisdom and sort of seeing where it goes. And then they did a whole sort of test with the public as they do with those things, and then they said, well, let's do another show, and it ended up turning into quite a few of them. So I was just really over the moon that I got to play this really wise, brave, strong, very interesting looking amazing character. Obviously she was seen in the movie, but this was the TV show, so I got to portray Luminara.
Yeah, she's Luminara Unduli, who was she's in Attack of the Clones, in the big fight in the arena toward the end of the movie, and she's also in Revenge of the Sith for about 2 seconds. You blink and you miss her, but she's there.
Yeah.
And I noticed that role is very similar to your own natural speaking voice.
Yeah, I think they lowered it slightly for the show, but yeah, she's definitely similar to the more serious side of myself.
And now
sort of unavoidable being a Jedi.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not known for having a lot of fun.
My favorite episode is when she gets stuck down in that cave because they were really looking for ways to kind of make her more three-dimensional as the character was evolving, and they decided they wanted to kind of continue having her on the show, and with the tete-a-tete that she has with some of the characters in the show, but they said, we want to try and make her funny and give her, not just make her serious the whole time and full of wisdom, but actually see how she can get herself out of, how she deals with obstacles in a kind of more humorous way. So by the time that was starting to happen, it really started to take on a whole other life of its own, which was cool.
And a little bit of a video game work for that too, right?
Yeah, baby, that's right. When I do the episodes, I do the videos, I do the movies, I do it all.
All right, so help me out with this one, Tom. I mean, we know the EGOT, right? That's when you have an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. Is there a science fiction version of that? She's been on Star Wars. She's been on Star Trek. Does she have to do Battlestar Galactica and Doctor Who?
Doctor Who has been suggested from quite a few people. I'd love to do Doctor Who.
Yeah, you'd be great on Doctor Who. Doctor Who is probably Doctor Who instead of Battlestar because it's long running. It's a franchise that's been around for decades, like Star Wars and Star Trek.
Better wardrobe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just threw Battlestar out there. I knew it wasn't on the same echelon. It was basically a Star Wars knockoff to begin with. I know it was revived, but I just meant, is there somebody who's been like, who can say, I've been on all the main sci-fi shows?
Yeah, the sci-fi.
Twilight Zone would have been good.
Yeah.
I did Twilight Zone.
Yeah, you did. So you've done Twilight Zone, Star Trek, Star Wars. Let's just give her a fourth one so we can give her an award. What are the sci-fi?
So far, it's the
I did
award.
Eureka.
Eureka? Does that count?
Sci-fi.
Okay, sure.
Okay, you did it. You're a sci-fi EGOT. And speaking of music, because we are at 32 minutes, for our exit music, we're going to return to the Christmas theme. We didn't talk about it much, but it is Christmas today. We hope
It is
everybody's having a great Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
So the track we played at the start of the show, the nod to Lou Reed, that was done by a vocal quartet from Minnesota called the Blenders. I thought we'd listen to a less jokey track of theirs on the way out as we wind up Christmas 2015. I spent a lot of time in church as a kid, and I heard a lot of hymns. Most of them didn't do much for me melodically, but every once in a while, the congregation would sing something I thought was pretty interesting. And this hymn/Christmas carol we're about to hear performed by the Blenders is definitely one of the ones that I found myself singing outside of church. We're also going to do a second one after that. You probably have to look a little more towards the back of the hymnal to find that. Before we get to that, we need to acknowledge the fact that this is going to be our final episode of 2015. I know we've only been at this for a few months now. It's not like we've put out a full year's worth of shows, but we want to thank everyone who's been joining us on this podcasting journey for your feedback and your support. It's much appreciated, and I hope everyone listening who celebrates such things is having a very Merry Christmas.
Yes, indeed. And, we have so much to be grateful for. And I know the holidays is a difficult time for certain people. I think it's just a weird time of year for everybody, but there's so much to be grateful for, thankful for, and, to look forward to in 2016.
I'm looking forward to 2016. My 2015 was better than my 2014. My 2013 totally sucked.
Yeah.
And I think good things are coming for all of us.
Yes.
So on that note, let us say bye-bye and see you next year.
Bye-bye.
Angels we have heard on high, sweetly singing o'er the plains, and the mountains in reply, echoing their joyous strains. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Come to Bethlehem and see Him whose birth the angels sing. Come adore on bended knee Christ the Lord, the newborn King. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Gloria in excelsis Deo. In excelsis Deo.
Jingle bells, Batman smells, Robin laid an egg. Batmobile lost its wheel, the Joker got away. Hey, thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, kid.